welcome back. Now, 300 families are fighting for their eviction from municipal land in Rabie Ridge, south of Midrand. The city says the land has been earmarked for a housing development that cannot get underway while the land continues to be occupied illegally. To discuss this, I'm now joined by Mlungisi Mabaso, who's the MMC for Human Settlements in Gauteng. Mlungisi, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Just if you could let us know these challenges of trying to get this housing development off the ground while that land has been occupied.
Well, thank you very much. Greetings to yourself and greeting to the viewers at home. Well, it's a challenge where you identify a parcel of land for development and people then decide to illegally occupy the land. And we have seen it now as a trend in the city of Johannesburg, where we identify then parcels, we earmark them for development, and people start to illegally occupy those spaces for them to be prioritized when the allocation comes. And it poses a serious challenge for the municipality and the planning process, because you will know that Johannesburg is very small in terms of land, but we've got a very large population in terms of numbers. So if we are unable to protect the little spaces that we have now for future development, then it means Johannesburg will not have sufficient spaces for development in the future, especially to accommodate those people that have been patiently waiting in the housing waiting list since 1996.
You're an MMC, as you're saying that if you're unable to protect those little pieces of land where you have earmarked them for housing projects, then you're unable to move forward. However, taking it back a step a little bit, if you were unable to protect those spaces and you were able to also provide housing, then people wouldn't then go and invade those spaces, wouldn't you say?
Well, there has been developments in the city of Johannesburg, even previously. You've got mega projects that were implemented a long time ago. Johannesburg, it's an economic hub. It's got economic migrants. People coming from all corners of South Africa migrating Johannesburg for economic opportunities, and when they have not get those opportunities, then they rely on government to provide them with accommodation. That's why the city of Johannesburg accounts for the majority of the people that need houses in the city of Johannesburg. But yes, of course, we have not done enough to provide houses, especially for those that are within the housing need register. And I think that's emanated from the resources that we receive from the national government and the provincial government. But all these spaces that we have in Johannesburg have been earmarked for development, either for houses or any other form of development that might be required by the community in those particular spaces. And currently the challenge that we face is these illegal occupations that are taking place in the city of Johannesburg. So over and above the mega projects that we have in Johannesburg, we are trying to introduce more mega projects in Johannesburg for us to deliver more units financially, so that we are able to address and deal with the backlog that we are currently battling with.
MMC, would you say that the backlog for housing in Johannesburg is ever increasing, or you are managing to try and kind of decrease that gap? Because as it stands, year on year, there are more and more informal settlements that are built. There are more and more people invading government land as well, out of a need of a housing crisis. So while we appreciate that, there is much migration into the city of Johannesburg, which has been the case since the discovery of gold, as the city, what are you doing to accelerate those projects?
Well, I think we've got three types of constituencies or communities that are in need of houses in Johannesburg. We've got people that are in the housing need register, people that have applied for houses. We've got people that are in need of houses, but they have not made any application. You will find them in the townships, you'll find them in the informal settlement, and you will also find them in the hostel. And our planning is mainly focused on those that are within the housing need register, those that are within the informal settlements, and those that are within the hostel. So we've got different types of programs, in fact, that we had introduced in Johannesburg to try and deal with the housing challenges within the city. And that's why you see all these mega projects that we are implementing, and that's why now we are making a call to the residents of Johannesburg not to illegally occupy the open spaces, because those spaces are earmarked for development. The land in Rabie Ridge is earmarked for a development of houses that will deal with the congestion and the informal settlements that are situated on lands that are not suitable for human settlements. There's a development in Region G that is coming up called Southern Farm. There's a development that is coming along the Midrand side called Gauteng Central. So all those developments that we are bringing them with an intention of dealing with the housing backlog that we are battling with in Johannesburg. We've got a grant and a policy in Johannesburg that talks to the upgrading of informal settlements. Currently, we've got 182 informal settlements out of the 343 that we are working to upgrade in the city of Johannesburg. There are consultants that have been appointed. They are on the ground. They are working with the leaders within these particular informal settlements. We've got programs within the hostels that we have introduced. We are finalizing a program that talks to the long-term development of whole hostels, which will be approved by council that we are finalizing as the department. So we've got quite a number of programs that we have introduced to try and deal with the housing backlog in Johannesburg. And the call that we are making it because there is work that we have already started doing. There are plans, there are designs that we are doing in this on those particular properties that are currently vacant, for us to introduce programs that will see us dealing with the backlog in Johannesburg. And all these invasions, in fact, hinders with the work that we are trying to do as the municipality. So we understand very well that we have a backlog that emanates from the applications of 1996 up until to date. But the reality is that with all those challenges, there is quite a lot of work that we are doing in try and addressing that particular backlog. And that's why we are calling on our residents to work with us and not illegally occupy all these spaces, because we need all these spaces for us to develop so that we are able to provide a decent accommodation for them.
And while you're making that call as well to residents to say do not occupy certain spaces illegally, particularly those pieces of land that are earmarked for housing developments, which also could benefit them too. Let's look at this case of the 300 families in Rabie Ridge, where you do have this land that's been earmarked for a housing development, but there are already people who are living there and occupying that land illegally. When you're saying to them, look, we really need the space to create housing and that could benefit for you as well, where are you saying that those people go in the interim while you build those developments as well? And are you going to be able to provide that alternative accommodation?
Well, the reality is that for us to provide an alternative accommodation, we must be compelled by court to do so. Because the eviction as a process, it's a legal process. And the judge must pronounce itself on how the eviction must be executed. So it's not a blanket approach where you just need to provide an alternative accommodation willy-nilly. So we are guided by the policy of council, but we are also guided by the court orders that we obtain when we approach court for us to do evictions. But with the land, the Rabie Ridge land, the one that we are referring to now. So all the people that went to illegally occupy that land, they knew that there is a development coming there, because when we started with the planning and the designs of that particular land, we went on to engage with the informal settlements that we have identified to benefit into that particular project. And immediately after we started those pronouncements, then people started to illegally occupy. And that's what we are trying to advise our residents against, to say, do not go and invade spaces that are earmarked for development, because you are actually hindering the work that the municipality is doing. So currently, instead of focusing on expediting the planning processes for that particular development, we are now compelled now to take a legal route of trying to move those people out of that particular space, because they know exactly that that land is earmarked for development, and they know the informal settlements that have been identified to benefit into that land. So now they want to take advantage of the system, that because it's a government-owned land and they must go there and illegally occupy, so that government provide them with alternative accommodation. And that's something that we need to speak against, and that's something that we need to advise our people not to engage themselves on, because it actually interrupts the work that municipality is doing in terms of providing decent accommodation for people. So part of the informal settlements that are identified to be eradicated and the residents be relocated into that particular development is people that are prone to flooding. And we are in summer now. So those people will be affected by floods because we are unable to move there because of those that have illegally occupied those spaces. So while they are engaging themselves into these illegal activities, but they also infringe on the right of the ordinary citizens that are patiently waiting for government to give them housing. So we are going to apply the law, we are going to embark on the legal processes, and we are going to adhere to the policies of council, and also will be guided by the court on how we must deal with those people that have illegally occupied that space. So we are not going to pronounce ourselves outside the legal processes that we have already engaged on as the municipality in trying to reclaim that land back, so that we proceed with the development of that particular area, because we've got people in the informal settlements that are highly congested, that are high dense populated. They are patiently waiting for us to commence with that development so that they benefit.
Yeah, and just before I let you go as well, the National Department of Human Settlements has called for a review of legislation as well, particularly the PI Act, the Prevention of Illegal Eviction from Unlawful Occupation and Land Act. Now, this is in light of that thing that you're speaking of now, being obliged to be taken to court and being obliged to then provide alternative accommodation, saying that the legislation as it stands puts departments such as yourselves in a very peculiar position as well, and a very difficult one indeed to do your jobs. Is this something you'd be supporting as well, the review of the PI Act?
Well, it's the discussion that has been ongoing in the MINMEC to say, you see, the legislation and the act in the country must be able to protect the citizens and government and its processes, because the processes of government and the programs of government are meant to benefit the people. So should anyone stand in the way of a development or a process that seeks to uplift the living condition or to improve the living condition of another individual within the society, so that in a way infringe on a right of a person that is eligible to benefit. So that's why they need to be balanced in the legislation, so that the legislation is able to protect government against the criminal element and the people that want to take advantage of the system. So we support that call by the minister. In fact, it has been a discussion within the MINMEC to say, let's look into this legislation so that we are able to protect the ordinary citizens that are behaving, that are patiently waiting for government to provide them with the programs. So all those people that take advantage of the system because there are certain legislations that protect them, that's what, in fact, we want to address now. And that's why there has been this call to review the PI Act, and the City of Johannesburg supports the review of the PI Act, and we will continue in the MINMEC to advance our argument on why the PI Act must be reviewed, so that the ordinary citizens that are patiently waiting, that are engaging themselves in legal activities in South Africa, are also protected against those that take advantage of the system, because they've identified a loophole within the PI Act, and that's why they are engaging themselves in these illegal activities, because they know that we are abided by the PI Act.
MMC, thank you so much for your time this evening.